After what happened last night, I'm torn between calling the police, curling up in a ball and having a breakdown, or scheduling an emergency session with my therapist. I still haven't decided what to do. I've already spoken with my friend Marcus and we've agreed on some initial steps, but first I need to tell you everything that happened. During my teenage years, my friends and I would frequently visit Crescent Valley Park to play soccer and swim in the community pool. The park also featured an extensive nature sanctuary that we loved to explore. Those days and evenings remain crystal clear in my memory, as experiences from your formative years tend to stick with you. We would play soccer for hours, then take long walks through the trails, which extended for miles in any direction you chose. The community pool closed permanently a few years back for reasons I can't recall now, but I celebrated many birthdays there throughout the years. As we grew older and became more interested in dating, the park became our spot for more private moments. Every town has that secluded meeting place for teenagers, and Crescent Valley served that purpose for us during high school. We had a large friend group, but Marcus and Trevor were my closest companions. We were inseparable. You'd almost always find us together when we weren't working or in class. We called ourselves the Triad and created a ridiculous handshake, all because we saw a sign in the nature sanctuary warning about poison oak with the cautionary phrase, "Clusters of 3? Let them be." After years of exploring the trails, we discovered many fascinating things forgotten by time. Ancient signage from decades past. Stone and wooden benches, overgrown with local vegetation. Hidden pathways so obstructed by fallen branches and trees that it was difficult to distinguish where the maintained trails ended and untamed wilderness began. I couldn't count how many times we got lost by accidentally wandering into the greater Westridge Forest, which contains the 20-mile section designated as the Nature Sanctuary. Each adventure seemed to reveal something interesting, some new location or relic from the past. It all ended the summer before senior year, when Trevor vanished. Since we spent every day together, Marcus and I wondered why we hadn't heard from him for several days. We visited his mother's house, and while she certainly loved her son deeply, she was accustomed to him staying out. By the time the authorities became involved, Trevor had already been missing for 3 days. We checked every place we could think of, and there was even a small search operation in Westridge Forest, but everything was called off after a few weeks. Apparently, authorities believed he had left town to work as a traveling salesperson for an outdoor magazine. He had done this previously, but his experience was so terrible and frightening that I would have never imagined him returning to it. I told the police as much, but I was just a high school student, and they thought they knew better. I'm not so sure anymore. Marcus and I remained close and still are 5 years later. With this background in mind, I want to explain what happened to me over the past few hours in Westridge Forest. The day began like any other. I woke up, checked some work emails, and brewed coffee while taking a quick shower. I'm grateful I completed college because although I'm not directly using my degree, it opened doors for entry-level positions in other fields, which will hopefully lead to better opportunities down the road. Before leaving home, I was scrolling through social media and saw a memory featuring Trevor, Marcus, and myself at a party. This stirred up both fond and sad memories, and I decided to take a walk at Crescent Valley Park after work and have a quiet moment of remembrance for a good friend. The forecast predicted perfect weather, and it had been some time since I'd visited. I considered calling Marcus to join me but realized he was hosting his monthly live stream marathon for his channel. I thought I might watch his stream later and let him know. Work was just work, and after clocking out, I stopped at a convenience store for energy drinks before heading to Crescent Valley Park. Though I live in a moderately sized city, there are plenty of rural roads and woodlands, which is generally where the park is located. It's only a 20-minute drive back to city limits, but you feel isolated when you're there, like you're truly alone with nature. As I pulled into the parking lot, a wave of nostalgia washed over me, putting me in a reflective mood. Life had changed significantly since being a carefree teenager walking these trails. I spent a moment of quiet contemplation outside my car, gazing at the trees swaying in the breeze. The sudden sound of birds taking flight snapped me out of my thoughts, and I decided to begin my walk. From the parking lot, I passed the abandoned, deteriorating community pool building. I had many fond memories there, though I was always too afraid to use the high diving board. I wondered why it had closed, as I recalled it being quite popular back then. As this thought crossed my mind, something else caught my attention. I could have sworn I heard someone speaking, though I couldn't make out what was said. It sounded casual in tone, but cut off abruptly. I looked around for several minutes before deciding it must have been the wind. I noted there were no other vehicles present, so that had to be the explanation. After leaving the pool behind, I walked past the soccer fields and tennis courts before reaching the main entrance to the nature trails. Approaching the trailhead, I realized not much had changed about the place since my last visit years ago. The entrance pathway still consisted of gravel instead of the packed dirt that made up the rest of the official trails. To the left stood the rickety wooden observation platform, now showing more signs of decay than I remembered. Ahead, I could see where the trail divided into 3 paths, each leading to different routes that connected with other trail segments. I should mention that the nature sanctuary has multiple exits. Whether they're all official is debatable, but after years of exploration, we knew of 3 ways to enter the sanctuary. I think at some point in the distant past during development, the boundaries were more clearly defined. If you hiked up the grassy slope alongside the soccer fields, you'd find a second entrance marked by a large, flat stone and a sign just inside the woods, though you wouldn't notice it from the outside. Perhaps a 10-minute walk from this exit, a trail opens into a clearing with a small waterfall from the stream that runs through parts of the park. On the opposite side of the sanctuary, there's a third entrance that I believe was likely created by kids like us, as it emerges into a youth baseball field with no signage whatsoever. During our teenage years, we regularly explored this entire area, so we came to know it extremely well. With all this in mind, there are numerous interesting spots to visit if time permits. But since I arrived after work, I knew I'd only have a couple of hours at most to explore. It would likely take that entire time to complete the full circuit, so instead, I chose the left path at the 3-way split. For the average first-time visitor, this is the trail I would normally recommend. It offers the most scenic views, with wooden bridges crossing the small stream that flows through the area. There are also several rows of classroom-style benches carved from massive fallen trees, with a sign detailing their creation. I decided to sit on one of these benches and checked my phone to see Marcus's stream. This area isn't far from the entrance, and from here you can either take one of 2 paths further in or simply turn back. I sat there for some time, reminiscing about our high school days, or days more accurately. These very seats held so many memories. My first real kiss happened here with Emma Parker, and more later. We held impromptu concerts with our portable speakers and had quiet moments with friends. We witnessed and participated in many confrontations, both playful and serious. Occasionally, law enforcement would show up, but I don't think it was a popular enough spot to warrant frequent visits from them. This was the only gravel area in the entire park, so we made youthful use of it. Marcus was clearly enjoying his gaming session on stream, and I noticed he was only 13 subscribers away from his next goal. So I gifted 15 with a smirk. You know how streamers thank people who gift subscriptions? Well, it's always hilarious seeing your friend do it, especially with my username, RidgeRunner417. As he read it aloud with gratitude, it hit him. The expression on his face pulled me from my daydreaming, and I burst out laughing. By now, he recognized who it was and shared a laugh with his viewers. I stayed watching for a few minutes, and we had some brief conversation until I mentioned where I was. His expression grew solemn, and he's considerate enough not to share our history with this place with his audience, beyond some exaggerated stories of our wild teenage antics. We agreed to return here together the following week when he had more free time. Now, in a somewhat improved mood, I got up from the bench and continued on my way. The trail I selected this time led down Foxglove Hollow. All the trails have names, though I've forgotten most of them. This one always stood out due to the alliteration. It functions as a connector of sorts, splitting into 3 paths that eventually lead back to starting points or exits. But if you follow it to its natural conclusion, you arrive at a large wooden deck that extends over part of the forest, providing a magnificent view of nature. That was my destination, as it marks the deepest point of the sanctuary. I planned to take one of the unremarkable paths back to my car afterward. Unfortunately, this excursion proved to be anything but unremarkable. I was walking along the hollow trail toward my destination when the hair on my neck stood up. I suddenly felt as though I was being watched. I've encountered various wildlife here before, including coyotes, but this sensation was different. I took several minutes to survey my surroundings and eventually convinced myself I was just being paranoid. Sunset was still at least an hour away, so I figured I had little to worry about as long as I exited the woods before then. After approximately 10 minutes of walking, I reached the wooden deck at the trail's end. This structure appeared to be in much better condition than the one at the entrance, so I happily sat down and checked my phone. I hadn't realized I'd left the stream running, so my battery was low. Slightly annoyed at my carelessness, I stood up and leaned against the railing, gazing out at the untamed forest. I was somewhat lost in thought, gradually slipping into melancholy when faced with the nostalgia of this place. At some point as I looked around, I noticed what appeared to be another trail at the bottom of this overlook, leading somewhere unknown. My friends and I had never ventured down there. Nothing we knew of connected to this trail. My curiosity was piqued, and after searching carefully, I initially saw only weeds and brambles. Looking more closely, I discovered a dirt path along the left side of the deck. It was overgrown with vegetation and seemed rarely used. I was excited by this find and looked forward to keeping it secret until Marcus and I returned the following week. With about 30 minutes before darkness fell, I reminded myself not to get carried away exploring. I began descending cautiously, as the slope was quite steep, and I was thankful it hadn't rained recently, keeping the ground dry. Upon reaching the bottom, I saw the path divided going left and right. I chose left, maintaining my pattern for the evening. I now wonder if going right might have changed everything. Almost immediately around the bend, I began noticing litter scattered across the ground. I felt irritated that people couldn't clean up after themselves, treating the world as their personal trash can. Walking a few hundred feet further, I realized it wasn't all garbage. There were also discarded clothing items. As I approached one particularly dingy piece of cloth worn threadbare by time, I noticed it was the upper part of a torn shirt with the tag still attached on the back. Someone had written their name on it, and when I read it, my blood ran cold. The name on the shirt was written as Trevor. If you followed this far, you might question the significance. Here's why it mattered. Trevor was one of my best friends in school, and that was his first name. Furthermore, he was the only person I knew who exclusively wrote in capital letters. Even for classroom assignments, he always used capital letters. We never really teased him about it, but it was simply a fact. I became utterly confused by what I was seeing. There's no way this could be my friend's shirt. The police supposedly searched the entire area. That's when I remembered how dismissive they had been, how convinced of their runaway theory. A whirlwind of emotions battled within me, each fighting for dominance. Logic and curiosity prevailed. There could be countless reasons why this shirt ended up here, perhaps just some kid who discarded their damaged clothing. It remained eerie, but I continued walking until I noticed some kind of drainage ditch alongside the path. It featured a rocky riprap drop-off to a culvert, perhaps 15 feet below. From my vantage point, I could see many more discarded items at the bottom. I found this odd, since this culvert likely connected to the abandoned community pool. There should be nothing flowing from that drain except possibly rainwater. As I gazed down below, I heard the snap of a twig. I spun around, every muscle tense. The hair on my arms and neck stood on end. I frantically scanned my surroundings, attempting to identify the source of the sound. Just as I began to relax, convinced it was merely a squirrel or similar wildlife, I glimpsed something behind a tree approximately 50 yards away. It was a face, a disturbing face that appeared pale and gaunt, with sunken features. I froze with fear, my composure slipping away. I'm unsure if the figure realized I had spotted it, but it remained motionless. Yet somehow I knew instinctively that it was simply waiting for me to lower my guard and continue walking toward it. I tried to calm myself and project nonchalance, uncertain whether my act was convincing, but the figure remained stationary. I took another look at the culvert, attempting to appear casual, then began retracing my steps at a brisk pace. I tried to maintain awareness of whatever was out there in my peripheral vision, but it proved difficult. When I reached the base of the path leading back up to the wooden deck, I risked another glance. Around the bend, I saw two more figures emerging from the rocky drainage area. I scrambled up the steep incline, grabbed onto the wooden deck, and pulled myself over. I began running as fast as possible down the path, not caring which trail I was on or paying much attention to where they branched off. In my panic-stricken state, I had only a vague sense that my car lay in this general direction, and that knowledge alone propelled me forward. I could hear movement behind me and knew I was being followed. By now, it was nearly dark, with the sun casting its final rays of daylight. Even with my phone nearly dead, I felt stopping to call for help would be suicidal. I was completely alone. I continued running, selecting random trails as they appeared. I chanced a look behind me and twisted my ankle, falling face first onto the dirt and leaves. Grimacing in pain, I attempted to orient myself as I pulled myself upright, steadying against a flat rock. Through labored breathing and sharp gasps of pain, I tried listening for movement but heard nothing. I then attempted to get my bearings, looking for signs or markings I might recognize. I realized I was near the exit atop the hill past the soccer fields. Safety seemed within reach. I could descend that hill directly to my car. However, I felt a primal fear at this prospect because I was now limping and unable to run that distance. In this way, I would be completely exposed in the open. If those figures were nearby, they would easily spot me. I cursed myself for not paying attention during my flight, but considering everything, I was still alive, a definite positive. Yet the safest way to remain hidden seemed to be somehow reaching the opposite end of the trails, where the main entrance was located. From there, it would be just a few minutes' walk to my car, but it was a significant challenge. As I contemplated my options, I heard rustling behind me. Before I could react, something grabbed my shirt collar and yanked me to the ground. One of the figures loomed over me, and I glimpsed what appeared to be a malevolent grin. It attempted to grab me, but I scrambled back to my feet, and we stared at each other for several seconds. Those seconds felt eternal, and I finally got a clear look at the figure. Strangely, it resembled a human, but with features that seemed almost hollow and disfigured. My initial impression still seemed accurate, though now I felt more strongly that this wasn't some supernatural entity. It appeared to be a person, somehow altered. I heard more noise in the distance, and the figure seized that opportunity to lunge for my neck again. This time I was prepared. Since returning home, I've been silently thanking my father for encouraging me to compete in wrestling throughout my life. I executed a fireman's carry and slammed the figure onto the rock headfirst. While not incapacitating it completely, it was clearly stunned, allowing me to scramble off the trails into the forest, hoping my general direction would lead me close to the main entrance. It was now pitch black. I realized not even halfway there that I'd never make it through the forest this way. My suspicions were confirmed when I heard more branches breaking and leaves crunching ahead. I turned around, knowing I needed to make a bold move. I limped as best I could toward the clearing, with my pursuers gaining ground due to my injury. As I approached the waterfall, I could hear heavy breathing right behind me, their movements almost excited. I glanced behind once more and saw 4 figures slowly approaching. I took out my last energy drink, a large can, and hurled it at the face of the first one that moved toward me. Then I did something I never could before. I jumped. There was no way to know if this was suicidal or not. I had no idea how deep the water below might be. Fortunately for me, there were no rocks, so I plunged in and resurfaced, swimming with the current as rapidly as possible. It was also fortunate that none of my pursuers made the same leap. I couldn't turn to see if they remained at the top of the clearing, but I had gained a small advantage because I knew this waterway became a creek further downstream, winding through the area with the tree benches near the main entrance. I arrived there undetected and gathered my strength. Now I just needed to reach my car. I hobbled along as quietly as possible and heard nothing from the surrounding forest. I remained terrified, now fully believing these figures might inhabit all of Westridge Forest. The only sounds in the night were my own foot scraping the ground as I half dragged, half walked on it. I was acutely aware that I might be drawing attention with this noise, but I finally reached the entrance and spotted my car in the distance. I cautiously and quietly made my way forward, staying in the shadows, constantly afraid of being noticed. I paused at the wooden deck to gather my energy and composure. There was still a considerable distance to cover before reaching my car, but I heard nothing. I continued crouching and sneaking as best I could, taking shelter next to the derelict pool building. This was it. Less than 30 yards separated me from my car. Yet the sensation of being watched returned. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, and my heart still raced from the nightmare of the past couple of hours. Fortunately, I didn't need to see, only hear. There was a loud bang followed by more banging sounds. I could feel the vibration. It originated from the abandoned community pool building. Was this where these strange figures resided? As if answering my unspoken question, I noticed movement higher up the wall and saw a small window with several ghastly faces pressed against it. I could see the malicious delight, the feral hunger in their expressions. I darted toward my car as quickly as possible. Despite the chaos and fear, I made it inside. I risked another look toward the building. From this distance, I could see that every window contained those terrifying faces. All appeared to be desperately trying to escape and capture me. The building seemed to vibrate, as if their combined efforts might penetrate brick and steel. I didn't believe they could exit through the windows, as they were too small, perhaps only a couple feet wide. I certainly wasn't going to test that theory or risk encountering more of them lurking about, so I drove away from the park at top speed. It seemed I hadn't taken a proper breath until my headlights illuminated the convenience store 20 minutes from Crescent Valley Park. I drove past and continued to my house. When I pulled into the driveway, I released an enormous sigh of relief and broke down crying. I had survived. I exited my car and immediately took a moment to collect myself, trying unsuccessfully to calm my nerves. Then I called Marcus and attempted to explain everything that had happened. He seemed disturbed, probably because I sounded deranged, I thought. To my surprise, he appeared to believe me. Having someone trust my account meant everything, as I knew the authorities wouldn't. We agreed that the shirt with Trevor's name was peculiar, and perhaps we could finally get answers about his disappearance if we investigated ourselves. We made plans to return during daylight, somehow armed, preferably in the morning to maximize our daylight hours. I know it sounds insane after the night I've just experienced, but after seeing that shirt, I realized how much I needed closure. The three of us were best friends for nearly a decade, and Marcus shares my feelings. I'm going to finish wrapping my ankle. It's probably sprained, but I just heard something outside. My hair stands on end because I've just realized something important. I didn't have to unlock my car when making my escape. I never checked my back seat.